Alright, guys, I'm back with more analysis on bigotry. Hold on about. Alright, I'm back with Inventing the Enemy. A new wave of persecution began in response to the spread of leprosy. Carlo Ginzburg, in his Ecstasies Deciphering the Witch's Sabbath, 1991, translated by Raymond Rosenthal, records that lepers were burned to death throughout France in 1321 because they had been convicted of trying to kill the whole population by poisoning water supplies, fountains, and wells. Quote, leprous women who had been confessed to the crime spontaneously or result of torture were to be burned unless pregnant. In that eventuality, they must be kept segregated until their confinement and the weaning of their offspring, and then burned. Jesus Christ. Okay, that reminds me of slave reading, the book Slave. Okay, off topic, totally, completely. If you're still reading it or listening to this reminds me of narratives of slave breeding, where they would have you bond with the child and build that connection and breastfeed and all that stuff. And then when the child is old enough, they get taken away. They have you form that connection just to ruin your family. All right. It is not difficult to identify here the origins of every persecution of those thought to be spreading plague, but Ginsburg describes yet another aspect of this phenomenon. The contagious leper were automatically identified with Jews or Saracens. Various chroniclers relate stories that accuse the Jews of aiding and abetting the lepers, and many of them were sent to the stake with the afflicted. Quote, the local population took justice into their own hands. Summoning neither priest nor bailiff, they chose the people in their homes, together with their livestock, goods, and chattel, and set fire to them. End quote. One leader of such a group confessed he had been bribed by the Jew, who had given him some poison, made with human blood, urine, 3 herbs, and pieces of consecrated host, placed in a sack that was weighed so it would easily sink to the bottom of the drinking fountain. But he said it was the king of Granada who had gone to the Jews, and another source also added the Sultan of Babylon to the plot. 3 traditional enemies, the leper, the Jew, and the Saracen, were thus brought together in one fell swoop. Reference to the fourth enemy, the heretic, was provided in the detail. The assembled leper had to spit on the host and trample on the cross. Rituals of this kind were later said to be practiced by witches. The 14th century saw the appearance of the first manual for the trial of heretics by Inquisition, such as the Practica Inquisitionis Heretica Pravitat by Gernardo Gu, and the Directorium Inquisitorum by Nicola Emmerich. And in the 4th century, while Marsilio Finici is translated Plato in Florence on the orders of Cosmo de Medici, and according to the well-known schoolboy's ditty, people were preparing to sing at last, the Middle Ages are past. John Nider's Formicarius, written between 1435 and 1437, and published in 1473, speaks for the first time in modern vein about the various practices of witchcraft. Innocent VIII wrote about these practices in the papal bull Summus Desiderante Affectibus of 1484. It has recently reached our ears, to our great distress, that in certain regions of Germany, persons of both sexes, heedless of their own well-being and straying from the Catholic faith, have no hesitation in giving themselves carnally to devils, incubus, and succubus, letting the progeny of women, animals, fruits of the earth die or perish, by means of spells, charms, incantations, and other odious magical practices, seeking, as our office requires us, by ways of appropriate remedies, to prevent the scourge of heretical depravity from spreading its poison to the detriment of innocent people. The aforementioned inquisitors Spengler and Kramer are permitted to exercise the inquisitorial office in those lands. And Spengler and Kramer, inspired also by the Formicarius, published their infamous Malleus Maleficarum, Hammer of the Witches, in 1486. The record of the Inquisition in 1477 against Antonia of the parish of St. Gero's in Diocese of Genova, sorry, I'm mispronouncing this, provide one of the 1,000 examples of how the witch was created. Quote, the accused, having abandoned her husband, went with Masset to the place known as Las Perroy near the stream, where a synagogue of heretics was held, and found there a large number of men and women who courted, capered, and danced backwards with her. He then showed her a demon called Rabbinate, who had the appearance of a negro, saying, quote, here's our master to whom we must pay homage if you wish to have all you desire, end quote. The defendant asked him what she had to do, and the said Messet replied, disown God your creator, and the Catholic faith, and that adulteress and Virgin Mary, and accept that demon called Rabbinate as your Lord and Master, and do whatever he wishes of you, end quote. Having heard these words, the accused began to feel regretful and refused at first to comply, but she eventually disowned the God, her creator, saying, quote, I disown God, my creator, and the Catholic faith, and the Holy Cross, and accept you, demon Rabbinate, as my Lord and Master, end quote. And she paid homage to the demon by kissing his foot. Then, in contempt of God, she threw a wooden cross to the ground, trampled it under her foot, and broke it. She was transported on a staff 1.5 feet long. To reach the synagogue, she had to fabricate it with the ointment contained in pyx, which was filled with it, and placed the staff between her thighs, saying, quote, go to the devil, end quote. And she was immediately transported swiftly into the air to the place of the synagogue. She also confessed that in the aforesaid place they ate bread and meat, they drank wine and danced again. The said demon, their master, having then transformed himself from a man into a black dog, they honored and worshipped him, kissing him on the behind. Finally, the demon, having doused the fire that was burning there with green flames of illuminating the synagogue, exclaimed loudly, quote, Meslet, Meslet, end quote. I have no idea what that means, guys, so I'm sorry if that's like a slur in some other language. And upon the cry, that men lay beastly with the woman, and she with the aforesaid Masset Garin, quoted in La Civiltate della Streg by Giuseppe Eugenio Battisti, 1964. All right. This testimony, with its various details about spitting on the cross and kissing the anus, is almost identical to the testimony given to the trial of the Knights Templar, which took place a century and a half before. What is surprising in this 15th century trial is that not only are the inquisitors guided by their lines of questioning by what they have read of the earlier trials, but also at the end of the interrogation, which seems fairly summary, the victim is herself convinced of the truth of the accusations made against her. At the witchcraft trial, not only is a picture built up of an enemy, and not only does the victim in the end also admit to doing what she hasn't done, but through the act of confessing she becomes convinced that what she is saying is true. You will remember how a similar procedure is described in Arthur Koestler's Darkness at Noon, 1940, and how during the trials under Stalin, a picture was first built up of the enemy, and the victims were then persuaded to recognize themselves in that picture. Even those who might otherwise hope to be viewed in a favorable light are induced, in this way, to become the enemy. Theater and literature provide us with examples of the ugly duckling who have been scorned by his equals, adapts to the image they have of him. I will quote Shakespeare's Richard III as an example. Quote, "But I, that I am not shaped by supportive tricks, nor made to court an enormous looking glass, I, that I am curtailed of this fair portion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world scarce half made up, and that is lamely and unfashionable. The dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why, I have no delight to pass away the time, unless to spy my shadow in the sun, and dissent my own deformity. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these farewell spoken days, I am determined to be a villain. Act 1, Scene 1. Alright. I'll be back, guys, with the next video.